I am very glad to be here today with Bob Frye, who is a television producer for many years and a documentary filmmaker. And we're going to talk about the film In My Lifetime, your most recent project, which is about nuclear weapons. Bob, what were your first memories about nuclear tests and nuclear weapons? Could you tell us a little bit about your feelings and reactions at the time and how it influenced your life and the future work of yours?
One of my most vivid memories, I think I was 16 or 17 years old, in 1956 or 57, I'll get the age thing out of the way right away. And I read On the Beach by Neville Shute. And for some reason, that book just hit me. And ironically, 3 years later, I was in Germany in the army, and I was working with nuclear weapon planning as an enlisted man. And so I had a very clear insight into the realities of nuclear weapons as a result of that experience. And from there, I went on to, I was in network television, and I did several projects over the years, but one specifically, there was a film called The Day After that was on ABC in 1983, and at the time I was the executive producer of World News Tonight at ABC. And I commissioned a 10-part series on it was called USSR, A Balance of Power. Of course, it was at the height of the Cold War. And as a result of that, I was looking at that series in preparation to do this project, and 5 or 6 of the 10 pieces had something to do with nuclear weapons. So I think that when this project came along, and I really started thinking about this in 2006, I'd written a memo to myself that I discovered in terms of going through various files, that I wanted to do a project on this. Because if we don't wake up the world to the reality of nuclear weapons and deal with them directly, you know, we're going to be turning around, God forbid, someday, how'd that happen? Whatever that happens to be. And as I've said in my project proposal, when I wrote to funders, go through all the various descriptions and plans and everything else, and the last sentence of my proposal is, all of that's fine except for one thing: nuclear weapons still exist.
The movie is about nuclear weapons. It is about the people who work with nuclear weapons or people who work on nuclear disarmament to eliminate them. It has a lot of different voices, this movie. And in some ways you don't judge the voices, you let people speak and come from all different perspectives. Yes. And also the film does not come to a conclusion. I mean, it doesn't conclude, it doesn't say what is right or wrong, and you don't take a position, but you let all these people talk. Why did you select that approach, and what was your aim with that? What is it that you would like to say through that approach and story?
Well, I feel when I started the project that it was important to tell and get different perspectives on the story. Because my goal, you know, you always hear these phrases about what's your demographic for this film? And my answer is, and was at the time, everyone in the world. And it's cross-generational, because for people of my generation and mid-generations like yours, it's a story that's known to some degree. But for the younger people, it's not. And I've now had enough screenings over the last almost year and a half that's proven that thesis to be correct. And also I've shown the film to many different people of different persuasions, both in the United States and in Europe. And they receive it on their own level. I think we live in such a divisive world today. You know, if you can make it easy for someone to turn away, and I've done films on the Holocaust, and I try to take the same approach. I don't want people to turn away. I want them to become engaged in the story. And after all, my background is as a filmmaker and as a network news producer. So I come out of that more, I don't know what you want to call, I don't call it balanced, but more of a observing the story and allowing the story to tell itself. Because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to satisfy myself. I've made this film to satisfy the world and to have the world engage in the topic and to understand it. And I think for the young, I've heard them now say, I didn't know that, and I want to do something about it. So that accomplishes the goal, doesn't it? So
your view is that if you allow all these different voices and all these different people to tell their own stories, you will engage a lot of people, a variety of people, and they will think for themselves, and yes. They will start thinking about this.
Yes.
Do you see, if you had chosen a different approach, I mean, many movies have a different approach, also documentary movies, they would try to guide the viewer. They would like to they have a very clear, they convince of a certain argument or a certain way of thinking.
But my attitude about that is you then cut out at least half the audience potential. And the film is purposely edited as a meditative piece. And the kind of music that is used. A French composer and musician, Alain Kremsky, actually, did most of the music, working with us. And what was important about that is that it's not threatening. You know, I mean, this is a threatening topic. You don't have to make it threatening. And I think it's important to allow people into the story. And that's really the approach as well. And the opening sequence, for example, the 24 days from the Trinity explosion through to the dropping the bomb on Nagasaki, came as a result. There are several threads that work through that. The first was obviously the events themselves that took place in 1945, but also the realization that 21 days after the Trinity explosion, the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. I mean, all of this was planned well before. I mean, the Nagasaki was an alternative site, as we know. But I think the notion that momentous decisions which began the nuclear age all happened in 24 days.
Yes, let us talk a little bit about the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and what it means to you. There is a segment in the movie about the CTBTO as well, and of course it is a treaty that is there. It is also a system that is there, and of course it's one of the, in your movie it's also one of the one example of well, it's one of the solutions.
Yes.
So, but you also point out the challenges now. In your view, why is the CTBT important for peace and security?
Because I think it's a symbol of what can be, and I think that it provides an opportunity to engage in the topic in a understandable way. I mean, unfortunately, there are politicians that don't want to engage in the topic, and that's why the challenges that you have to face in terms of getting the treaty into force. But I think enough has been shown, certainly in terms of the operational system, which is I mean, the operational system, for all intentional purposes, is in force. It's the political system that's not in force. And that has to do with the political will of a few nations that have to step up. I mean, certainly Indonesia is the latest example, and the foreign ministers in the film saying essentially that, do the right thing. But, you know, that kind of moral judgment has to be shared by others that haven't yet been able to cross that line. So I think that all of those reasons are what is an important part of the story of CTBT. And I think that it will have a conclusion. It's just a matter of, I'll just say it's a matter of time. There is an opportunity here. And if one can move beyond whatever the mindset is, to realize that this opportunity is one that can be seized and dealt with. And also, it's not a matter of you're just signing into something that's a vague notion. You're signing into something that in all the countries that have the sites that are reporting back into this building. So it's not like you're operationally not haven't signed on to this. It's just the political will. I mean, it's just the political will is a huge, huge hurdle.
One can say that, well, testing has virtually screeched to a halt. It screeched to a halt in 1996 when the treaty opened for signature.
Right.
We had 2,000 nuclear explosions between 1945 and 1996, and we have had less than a dozen, depending on how you count, in the last 15 years.
That's a conclusion.
At the same, and of course, there is a strong norm, but as you say, there is this last mile to go for a number of countries, and they don't do that. If you look at that, how does that influence or impact our chances to achieve a nuclear weapon-free world?
That's the nut, isn't it? I mean, I think I do a lot of work in cross-cultural conflict resolution, integrating ideas about that. And I think that's really where we are in the world today. Is there a way to approach different cultural perspectives? I mean, is it all about the security paradigm? I mean, it would be naive to say, well, you can't take security into account when you're having these discussions, because that is for whatever reason, one of the reasons that one of the real reasons why that bridge has not been crossed yet, because people argue about the security.
But are countries more secure because they have nuclear weapons? Is the world more secure because it has nuclear weapons? Well,
it's interesting. I was having a conversation at lunch today. I guess a strange thing happens when you walk into this complex. You talk about the topic. That, what if you got rid of all the nuclear weapons in all the nuclear weapon states, and then you look at their security apparatus? Would it be much different in terms of where they are in the pecking order of things? I doubt it. So if you took nuclear weapons out of off the table, they'd still be probably the most, quote, secure nations in the world without having the uncertainty of nuclear weapons, because, you always have these discussions about, well, they're never going to be used.
Wouldn't they be more secure? That's my view. My view is that these countries would be much more secure without nuclear weapons.
I think that is a very good point, what it does is it takes away the destructive power of the uncertain event, the unpredictable event, the unforecastable event.
To go back to the film a little bit, you interviewed a lot of people for this movie, and your strength is as an interviewer, in my view, which I think is wonderful to watch, is that you let people speak, and through that they do tell their stories and they do come to conclusions. But if you maybe you would like to mention a couple of people who impressed you a lot and inspired you in turn.
My answer to that is everyone that's in the film plus. Because the thing that has struck me as I went around doing all these interviews, the dedication that people have. They're absolutely dedicated to their purpose. And there are a lot of people that are not in the film, incidentally, that have the same kind of level of dedication. That's what I was struck by. I mean, obviously, and I say obviously from the standpoint, the Habakasha continue to stun people into silence by their testimony. But there are many others too, quiet people. And whether they're involved for or against nuclear weapons, there's a passion for what they do. And also I interviewed authors, anthropologists, for example, that think about these issues a lot, because it's just different perspectives. So I mean, I could cite a lot of names, but I don't think that's the issue for me. I try to engage people with what they have to offer, not what, you know, I mean, I know what my opinions are, but my opinions are not going to be the ones in the film, right? This topic is more about having, you know, having the opportunity to understand what other views are, because out of that, and I think it's true with this topic in particular, out of that, there might be a solution, right? I mean, that's something I'm constantly looking for, and I know that's what you're looking for. And most people that are engaged in this line of work, what are the solutions? How do we get there? I've been asked, do you really think this can happen? I said, I really do. I think that I wouldn't have done this film if I didn't think that there was a way. And I became more convinced that you referred to before, well, what have you learned through this process? And I don't believe it's Pollyannish. I think it's a matter of you've got to engage on the level of, you know, wherever it is.
So you have to give time in filmmaking, and you have to go with the flow, and
Right.
that's. If you compare this film project with other films you have made, what similarities and differences do you see?
The process is similar, but the difference is the amount of time that it took to do it. And incidentally, because I produced 3-hour documentaries in network television, I was not daunted by the proposition. It's just that I was essentially doing it myself, and the executive producer actually is my wife. Helped raise funds for the film, and also did the photography in Japan. And when I did a 3-hour film, I think we had 75 people, but we got that done in 2 months. Ended up getting on the air, was a worldwide exclusive. This film's taken 4 years. But it's the same equivalent process. It's just a matter, you can't be afraid of taking on the topic. Well, people say, well, what part of the story are you going to tell? Well, I made the decision, you can't really tell part of the story without going back and telling the whole story. Well, that's why. Because if you're looking at younger generations who have no real engagement with this, they have to understand something to be able to make decisions, right? And I think also for people that are in the complex, or they're in government, or they're involved at whatever level of work, I think it's a useful reminder of how we got to where we are. And that's another purpose for the film, is how do we get here? But that also, getting back to your original question about, you know, why haven't you come to conclusions? Well, some conclusions are presented, but they're presented in the context of what in fact has happened. I think there's today too much prediction. And prediction is a waste of time, because we don't know. But if you give a basis for people understanding the story and see what unfolds, and that takes patience, you know, and that's part of what I get very impatient by, because so much is filled up with predicting. And if you go back and look at the records, whether it's a year or 5 years from now, most of that stuff has gone into ether, and it's not reality. But I think if you provide a basis for people to understand, from there, it's a teaching concept as well, where you can have the opportunity, okay, let me work with that. And I feel part of it is planting seeds, because for the younger generation, and even for some people that are involved in the work, they might get an idea from that. So I think part of the film for me is sparking ideas. It's not just about giving ideas.
So what would be your message, your advice to young filmmakers that have just started their career?
I have been doing a lot of mentoring for the last many years now. And the first thing I suggest to them is understand what you're trying to accomplish. Why do you care about a story? Do you have curiosity? Because if you're not curious, go into another line of work. And today, it takes a lot of gumption, I mean, as an independent filmmaker, to do a project. And I think that all of these things, don't give up. Have patience, be persistent, and understand that, you know, nothing unfolds the way you think it's going to, which means you have to really adapt to whatever the circumstances are. But also enjoy it. I mean, I'm now at a certain age where a lot of my colleagues are well into retirement, and I just don't believe in that, because first of all, I feel a corny thing maybe, but I feel that I'm making a contribution. As long as I feel I'm doing that, why not do the work? So for young people, I think I would encourage them to look at it in that way. And also, one of the things about education today, they may not be getting the kind of history and writing and all those other things that they need to have to do the work. They have to learn. That's part of it. You know, you just don't glide and think that you can skim the surface of something and get into the depths of a story.
Do you have to feel passion?
If you don't have passion for what you're doing, it's sort of along with curiosity as well. Then move away to do something else. And if the project is something you don't feel passionate about, it won't take you through the times that don't have to necessarily be there, but may be there.
What keeps you going? What inspires you?
The need to tell a story, the need to understand why the story is important, and also, as long as the good Lord gives me the opportunity, I'll do the work. I mean, I'm obviously not that young any longer, but I still think it's important to do the work. And also, as I said a few minutes ago, you know, being able to help others. And also, with this film, in my lifetime, I feel it's a mission. I mean, I have my own personal opinions about what should happen with this. Some of them I've shared with you indirectly, but I feel that it is very relevant to today's world and tomorrow's world, and that something has to be done. And I think that that's really, I have written, it's a warning. You know, it's a film that needs to be seen to appreciate what the realities are, and I hopefully have tried to be true to the realities.
Maybe you would like to elaborate a little bit on what your conviction is, what your personal conviction is. Is it, do you believe that a nuclear weapon-free world is possible?
I would not have done the film if I didn't think, by addressing the topic, that there would be an opportunity to have that discussion in a proactive way. And I think there's a bridge, a connective kind of thing. I think my role in this, a small, and I mean very seriously, a small role, if I can help aid and abet the dialogue, that's where I am with this. I mean, if I decided to take a position, I'd burn out overnight, because that's not my background. The other thing, I have a thesis I came up with a few years ago, call it the 98% factor. As I look out the window here on a beautiful sunny day in Vienna, 98% of the world is moving along just fine, doing what it needs to do. It's the 2% that's a challenge. I mean, and I think people that are involved with nuclear weapons are working on the 2%. You know, but they still live a 98% life, right? And so how do you create that way of looking at life? And does that help free up the mind to come up with a possible solution? You know, it's always, which door do you put the key in? Or is there a door? Or do you take the wall out? I mean, whatever that framework is, I think provides an opportunity. It's a non-answer to a question, but it's more a philosophical answer. And I will let you get back to doing your work, and I will go back to trying to tell the story in whatever way I can.
But it sounds to me like you're an optimist.
Yes. I mean, you have to be. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that if you're not, go sit on a log somewhere and wait for it to pass.
We knew the world would not be the same. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.